So, if you have watched our most recent live unboxing, then you'll know that we're reviewing the Acer Predator X27 gaming monitor. The question is, do you even need 4K 1440Hz?
Do you need HDR?
What about G-Sync? Where is Shah? Is Simon just Shah in a bodysuit? Am I Shane? Or am I really just going insane?
The Acer Predator X27 is at the pinnacle of gaming monitors right now with a resolution of 4K UHD up to 144Hz, a Display 1000 HDR certification, as well as Nvidia's proprietary G-Sync HDR technology. What's more, it also packs the quantum dot technology and uses the same AU Optronics panel as the one from their competitor. But of course, for some of you, actually no, most of you, its massive price tag of 9,999 ringgit or 2,000 US dollars will feel very much like a kick to the Is it worth all that cash though? You know what? Let's find out. In terms of aesthetics, the Predator X27 is made for all you ballers out there and looks pretty bomb. With its sleek and slightly edgy design, this monitor is one of the best looking monitors out there on the market. The X27 is primarily black with some brushed metal accents. The front is pretty simple with a sizable bezel while the back has two different finishes and is by no means the thinnest. It houses an active cooling fan which cools the new G-Sync HDR module, a pair of bottom-facing speakers and the FALD or Full Array Local Dimming backlight, which is probably why this monitor is so chunky. The OSD navigation is placed at the bottom right of the back, and this is where you can enable cheat crosshairs, dark boost options, and also adjust color and backlight controls like brightness and nits, color, temperature, contrast, and all that good stuff. This monitor comes with a removable hood with screw-on sides and a magnetically attached top piece. Other than blocking out distractions during gaming sessions, it seems that it was intended for professional applications because the top hood allows you to pop in a monitor calibrator. We also have a headphone mount that clips onto the top of the stand. There is an ambient light sensor at the top of the monitor that will kick in once you turn on the auto brightness setting in the OSD. While made of mostly plastic, the X27 does have a unique looking metal stand that looks like a sculpture with a convenient handlebar at the top. Overall, the construction is pretty sturdy, so I'm not complaining. Of course, a monitor in this price bracket better come with some RGB. Acer put in two LED RGB strips in the monitor, one in the V-shaped vent near the top of the back and another one along the bottom edge of the monitor. You can configure it via the OSD. In terms of ergonomics, you can tilt the monitor 25 degrees up and 5 degrees down, swivel it up to 20 degrees on both sides, and adjust the height up to 130mm. With the stand, it weighs a whopping 12.3 kilograms with a height of 445mm, 374.7mm of depth, and 629mm of width. Without the stand, it's much lighter at 4.77 kilograms with a height of 374.7mm and a depth of 86.5mm. It is also VESA mount compatible and comes with a bracket just for that. The X27 is a monitor that requires an active cooling fan to cool its internals. But this fan has good manners though, because it ramps up slowly as you turn it on from idle instead of going crazy right away. It's like a cat. If you play with it, it will purr. There's simply no way around it. Firstly, you can't turn the fan off. When you play HDR content on this guy, the fan gets fired up quite a bit and it may or may not be an issue depending on the levels of your ambient noise. However, I would argue that half the time when we're playing games, we'll be wearing headphones anyways, so that can be an offset. Also, the sound is quite a bit softer in SDR mode. It's still audible, yes, but nothing too concerning. For people who use VESA mount and is concerned about increased noise levels, Acer has included a new VESA mount bracket with vents on it to improve airflow, and that should pretty much fix it. Moving on to connectivity, at the bottom of the monitor's rear, there's a HDMI 2.0 port, a DisplayPort 1.4, and a single lonely 3.5mm audio jack. Beside that, you'll find the USB 3.0 ports, one upstream and 4 downstream, 2 beside the upstream, and 2 quick access ports on the left side. Next, let's talk about specs. Ergonomics. The Predator X27 has a 27-inch screen size, though I do wish it was a little bit bigger since this is a 4K UHD monitor. Naturally, being a 4K UHD monitor, the maximum resolution is 3840 by 2160 with an aspect ratio of 16:9 and a very high pixel density of 163.18 ppi. It uses an IPS panel with FALD, or full array local dimming backlighting, which is a type of LED backlight technology. A response time of 4 milliseconds gray to gray and 178-degree vertical and horizontal viewing angles. The refresh rate can be adjusted from 98Hz to 120Hz as well as 144Hz at various color outputs once overclocked. The X27 also comes with NVIDIA's G-Sync technology and of course a 99% Adobe RGB and 100 sRGB coverage. On to the juicy part, performance. We're gonna break it down to two parts, HDR Performance and SDR Performance, to show you where the X27 stands in today's monitor standards. Let's start with HDR. In order to properly support HDR content, a monitor must first have good brightness support, and sure enough, the X27 with its native brightness of 600 nits sustained and 1000 nits peak has definitely got it down. We used our X-Rite i1 Display Pro to test the brightness accuracy and it pretty much held up. Say the content requires 800 nits to be displayed, that's pretty much what you get with the X27 at default settings. Because of the FALD backlight with 384 zones, the X27 has great contrast and they are fast, so bright objects don't leave a visible afterglow as they disappear from view. Also, each zone is pretty small, so halo around bright objects are barely noticeable in games and movies, though you might still experience them in desktop usage. Calculating contrast ratio with local dimming is actually pretty difficult because the results will vary very much depending on the content or patterns you use to test it. Acer states that the contrast ratio goes up to 50,000 to 1 in HDR, but we can't be 100% certain. I can tell you though that the black levels are obviously way lower than other monitors that do not have local dimming. With the X27, you get a few options for backlight speeds in the OSD, but I'd recommend that you stick to the gaming mode because it is the fastest. You can also adjust the brightness for SDR content via Windows 10's HDR and WCG settings, which allows up to 500 nits of brightness for SDR content, which is way brighter than most people can use. When it comes to wide gamut support, the Predator X27 provides an amazing coverage of 93% DCI-P3, 99% Adobe RGB, and extends beyond 100% sRGB. Unfortunately, this monitor is not a true 10-bit panel. It is an 8-bit plus FRC panel that supports 10-bit color processing. However, you won't be able to tell a difference unless you're doing extremely color-crucial design or photography work. In layman terms, for games or content with good HDR support, you get 1. More vibrant images because the display can display more colors, or number 2, it also shows you more details, especially in high contrast scenes. For instance, in sunny outdoor scenes, not only will this monitor be able to show you details in bright areas with elements such as the sun at a dazzling 1000 nits without overexposure, it will also be able to display much of the details in shaded areas. This is all thanks to the much larger dynamic range of this monitor versus regular SDR displays. Some sources on the internet have reported some minor issues when it comes to the refresh rate and chroma subsampling, so we went ahead and tested it out. In essence, the DisplayPort bandwidth is the culprit because it is insufficient for SDR or HDR content at 4K 144Hz. Rather, full 444 RGB is only achievable at 4K 120Hz in SDR mode and 4K 98Hz in HDR mode. If you absolutely must run at higher refresh rates up to the monitor's maximum 144Hz, you have to tolerate the 422 chroma subsampling, which lowers the chroma resolution and may introduce some artifacts. While practically unnoticeable in video content and games, these artifacts are more visible around solid edges and text in desktop apps. Even though it's a minor issue, I still wish that the DisplayPort didn't prevent this monitor from reaching its maximum potential. What you can do about it is either, number 1, to cap the monitor at 98Hz or 120Hz in SDR mode, 2, run at 98Hz for HDR gaming unless unless you have the hardware with enough juice to exceed 100 FPS in 4K. Next up, SDR Performance, and with the X27, you do get a few presets that you can toggle between in the OSD. In standard mode, the monitor's peak white level is set to 400 nits by default. Switching on dynamic backlight will give you a much improved contrast ratio for most SDR content with impressive black levels, so I suggest that you turn it on. In terms of the color performance, all Predator X27 units are factory calibrated to a delta E accuracy of less than 1.0 for SDR content, which is really tight and professional. So I'm really surprised that Acer didn't advertise it more on their website or everywhere else, because if I do have a delta E accuracy of less than 1.0, I will be singing about it and screaming my lungs out about it. Yo, I have a delta E of less than 1.0, mother. I measured the default color performance with the eye profiler display quality assurance, and it definitely impressed me with a delta E average of 0.48 in the color checker test, which is crazy. If you don't know what all this means, just know that this monitor has near perfect color performance right out of the box. After a proper round of calibration, we got the delta E average down to a minuscule 0.34 in the color checker test. But you'll need to get an expensive colorimeter, and you probably won't notice much of a difference, so feel free to just leave it. Finally, we test the panel for luminance and color temperature or white point uniformity. While there are certainly rooms for improvement, especially in the corners, this is probably one of the best panels we've seen. There is a little bit of IPS glow, which is pretty normal, but it is quite minimal considering that this is a 27-inch monitor. For response time and input lag, unfortunately we do not have the professional tools to test it out, so please take our words with a grain of salt. Firstly, response time. The Predator X27 has two overdrive modes, which are normal and extreme. Even in normal, it is still quite aggressive. Sure, overdrive gives the X27 a quicker response time, but for some transitions, that's quite a bit of overshoot. The only way to prevent overshoot is to actually disable the overdrive. However, there seems to be a decreased gray-to-gray response time at this point. We did a little bit of research online, and some reliable sources did confirm our observations about the average gray-to-gray response time being increased to about 6 milliseconds, which is still slightly better than most popular VA panels out there. Now that we got all of that out of the way, let's talk about the pros and cons of the Acer Predator X27 gaming monitor. Let's start with the pros. Number 1, we have the sleek and edgy design as well as sturdy construction. Number 2, top of the line gaming experience with 4K UHD, 144Hz, G-Sync HDR, as well as acceptable response time and input lag. Number 3, great HDR performance with good brightness accuracy. When gaming in HDR mode, a larger dynamic range means that you'll be able to see more vibrant colors and more details in highlights and shadows with amazing contrast, thanks also to the FALD backlight system. Number 4, panel quality is top-notch. Here, you get great luminance and color temperature or white point uniformity across the board. Number 5, perfect color performance with minimal adjustments. For most people though, the factory default setting is already top-notch and should blow your mind. Number 6, and this is a bonus, you can pop in a monitor calibrator without removing the top hood, which is a feature that some people may use. Moving on to the cons. Number 1, we're nitpicking, but this is not a true 10-bit monitor, so if you need one, this is not for you. Number 2, other issues are mainly early adopter issues such as number 1, the active cooling fan, and number 2 is too expensive to buy and more expensive to run because you'll probably need a dual RTX 2080 Ti configuration to run it at the best performance that it can give you. And number 3, the chroma subsampling due to limitations by the DisplayPort bandwidth is frustrating for some people. Finally, due to the lack of HDR content right now in games, the 10,000 odd price tag on this thing may not be worth it for some of you. But if you want the best of the best in gaming monitors right now, this is one of them and you should grab it. That's all, folks. If you like this content and love more videos like this, please give us a like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below if you have any questions regarding the Predator X27 and we'll try our best to answer you, and we'll see you in the next one.